Heyo, welcome to Minecraft. My name is Arrington, and today we are in our third test episode, what I'm going to call the Sorcerer's Swamp episode. As we're now in our third test video, I figured it was about time that I give an idea of what we're doing here. The test episodes are not only for me to test my editing skills, as in the remastered episode or the director's cut that came out last week, but also an opportunity to test my building skills in different themes and biomes as well. My plan for my first multiplayer series is to go full pirate, and until then I want to try out as many other new building styles as I can. We started in sort of a comfort zone for me with a small seaside shop in the plains biome, and then on to the Viking Lodge on the cliff sides of a spruce biome. Today we are going to be building in more of a fantastical style in the middle of a swamp. The plan is to build a small village full of witches and wizards exiled from their home and forced to live in the small village of Sorcerer, also known as the Sorcerer's Swamp. So my thought here to begin is to build a large tree stump on a hill. In a distant past, it was the largest tree in all the land, flowing with magic. But as time passed and magic became shunned, the tree became dead and fell. All that remains is the stump that will be the home of our village leader, the wizard. From there, we'll fill out the area down the hill from the wizard's home, and that'll become our witch's village. Sadly though, the low ground they build on floods often, and therefore their homes have all been built up on stilts to avoid the rising waters of the swamp. So as described, we're going to go ahead and first work on building up the remains of the enchanted tree and the new home for our sorcerer. I wanted to be sure that the stump looked like it was a part of the terrain, and did my best to show this by extending out the large roots and planting them into the ground amongst some other foliage. Making the stump look natural was the next challenge. With the stump being larger than the average tree, but not yet large enough to really texture, I had to focus on making the outside look detailed in other ways. I started by avoiding an exact cylinder, adding in some thicker areas, and making sure the top was not entirely flat. I then added some mushroom shells. I decided I wanted to go all the way with the idea of the different mushrooms surrounding the damp area, and added in some small patches of mycelium as well. From there I went ahead and extended the path down towards the future village. I added doors, a small window, and also worked on adding a chimney. While working on this build, I also decided that I wanted to experiment with some different plants more magical in nature. I tried crimson and warped fungus, but ultimately felt they were a little too garish for the vibe I was going for, and settled on just adding in some of the teal-colored nether roots and sprouts. Nearing the end of the build, I added some trees to fill out the environment, some pumpkins, and a few barrels lying around to really make the area look lived in. Alright, and so with the time-lapse finished, I figured we'll give a tour of the inside. I went ahead and finished up the interior off camera, and let's go ahead and check it out. So inside we've got some soul lanterns as the lighting, giving that dark vibe in the room, as well as just the idea of a magical lighting source. Back in the back here we've got a cauldron for brewing potions. We've got some of this nether root growing in here. I feel like that is what is growing from the remnants of the magic in here, which if you look really closely you can tell there's some purple particles floating around the room, and that's actually achieved by I put in some ender chests under some carpet behind some blocks, and so I feel like that gives the vibe that there is just a magical presence here in this tree stump, and that's what's allowing them to grow these teal, the nether sprouts, the nether roots, the warped vines, all of that here. And then we've got some, every good wizard's got to have his library. He's got his nether wart growing there, as well as a little area over here for brewing together potions. He's got, his alchemy book. He's got a countertop here. It's a little messy, he's not a very clean wizard. He dropped some redstone there as he was making potions. And so that's all we've got going on in here. It's a pretty small build on the interior side. Just a kind of basic interior. Nothing too fancy. But yeah, so that's what we've got in here. We'll go ahead and travel on back out and down the path. And from here, this is where we're going to go ahead and start our little witch's village. I'm going to build a bunch of different huts on stilts here. Maybe some boardwalk kind of walkways to keep them up out of the mud and the rising waters. And maybe build 2 to 3 houses just to kind of get the vibe of what I'm going for in this area. Long ago, in a time before the 5 creators fled, there stood a wondrous kingdom. This kingdom was called Seranus. For many years it was a thriving utopia, where one could be anything they desired. But as we all know, the idea of perfection is one of the greatest fairy tales of all time. Unbeknownst to the leaders of the kingdom, prejudice and scorn had begun to seep in. In a place where magic used to be revered for its healing abilities, fear had instead grown. Little by little, people began moving to the other side of the street when those that practiced magic would walk by. Their malice soon grew into segregation. Witches, wizards, and warlocks were refused rooms and service in the wealthier portions of the kingdom. Mobs of once peaceful citizens would band together and force them out of their homes. Before too long, their residence had become a filthy existence in what used to be pristine parts of the kingdom, that now had become gutters and slums. Yet this too was blamed on the bearers of magic. In the horrid conditions, magic began to fade altogether. In one last effort to live peaceful lives, they exiled themselves to the swamps. Their small community banded together to turn this dreadful place into a home. They built several houses out of any materials they could find. They learned quickly that in order to stay out of the muck, they would need to stick to the high ground or build homes up on stilts. As they settled in, they began to notice oddities. Fires burned blue with magic, and strange teal plants grew near their homes. The witches experimented with these plants, grinding them to powder, and the wizards brew potions. Together they soon learned that they could grow a new variant of this plant, a vine, a tall twisting vine that would grow up from the ground without needing anything to hold on to, and sturdy enough to climb. Now if only it would grow beans. Their solemn leader, the great Sorcerer Arrington, had found in that swamp one remaining vein of pure magic. It lies struggling to hold on in the remains of a once majestic tree. Here they settled, in the village of Seranth, what most came to know in spite as the Sorcerer's Swamp. Alright, and so with the time-lapse done, I figured I'd give you a tour of what we've got built down here. As soon as I finished up the time-lapse, I went on the inside and I finished up the interiors of the builds, so I'll show you each of those now. But first I want to notice that, I want to mention how the path dips down here. I really like this effect, how it comes down from the Sorcerer's home, and it's almost as if the path has been washed away here. It really shows that if you don't build up on high ground, you're really at risk of the different dangers of the swamp. So we'll start here on the left. We've got Varlin's home, the witch. And Varlin likes to spend her time studying, so she's been studying different books and whatever she can get her hands on to see if there's any lore or history to these strange teal plants. And she focuses on the roots and the sprouts. We'll come down over here, past the common area. Back over here to the twins' house, Lepik and Jevil. Now Lepik and Jevil have been spending their times working on different potions that they can make out of the teal plants. And they actually stumbled upon the mushroom variant. They haven't figured out all of the applications there, but there's sure to be promise as to what they can do with the strange teal mushrooms. And lastly here we have the House of Anders. Now Anders was the first one to discover the strange twisting vines. Unfortunately, he discovered how to grow them inside of his house, and they broke through the roof. And then if we follow the path on out to the end, we can see where they learned the hard way that you definitely have to build your house up on stilts or on the high ground, as this area of the swamp claimed their first home. And so that's the quick tour of what we've got going on here, and how we've got the magical plants, the strange teal plants, kind of taken over the whole area. They're really focused on this and what it means to their magic and what they're going to be able to learn from it. And I like that that's become a living element of the area. So with that, we'll close the book on this chapter of our story. I put a lot of thought into the lore of this episode, and I'm working on integrating that lore into a future story. If I'm lucky, this episode will end up being the first canon work, a bit of a prologue. But with that said, I want to again thank everyone for watching, and if you liked the video, then leave a like. If there's anything new in this episode that you really liked or didn't care for, then leave a comment and let me know. And if you want to get notified on any future content from my channel, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. I hope to see you in the next video.